The one with the pediatrician is the third episode of season 9 of Friends. This is directed by Roger Christiansen, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. There are three main parts to the narrative, so I'll talk about each of them in turn. I'll talk about Ross first of all, and then Phoebe, and then Chandler and Monica. And Ross's story focuses on, well, Emma's pediatrician, Dr. Wiener, and Rachel keeps calling Dr. Wiener, including in the early hours of the morning. And I imagine her reaction to Emma even having, well, she had hiccups at one point. I imagine Rachel's seemingly over-the-top reaction is actually quite common. I feel like I would be the same. If I was caring for a new baby, I would be so worried every time something seemed not right. I probably wouldn't call the pediatrician at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I could see Rachel having quite a believable response. And Dr. Wiener fires them. So they have to find a new pediatrician, and they end up going to Ross's childhood pediatrician. And I stress childhood there because that's not actually the case. We think that Ross went to Dr. Gettleman as a child. He still goes. And I love the fact, I think it was such a great decision that Rachel went down there and Ross had lied and said he had died. And I love the fact that when Rachel went down there to take Emma, Ross was coming out of Dr. Gettleman's office. She could have found out in some other way. Dr. Gettleman could have just asked her about Ross, but the reveal of Ross in the doctor's office, getting his lollipop, I thought it was a really good decision. It was very funny. It was very, very effective. And later on, towards the end of the episode, Ross goes back down to the pediatrician. And also, if anybody in the States knows this, would Ross actually be allowed to go to a pediatrician? Would his health insurance pay for doctor's visits? I mean, he could be paying out of pocket, I don't know, but presumably his health insurance is paying for his checkups. Would he actually be allowed to go to a pediatrician? Would the health insurance cover that? Or because he's not a child, would it not pay? I have no idea. I'm in the UK, but if anybody has any thoughts on that, I'd love to know. And towards the end of the episode, as I was saying, Ross goes back there. He meets a woman, another single parent, and they seem to get along really well. And then Ross's name is called, and he pretends another child is his son, and it's really awkward and really, for Ross, very embarrassing. And yeah, I wouldn't want to be Ross in that moment. It would have been less embarrassing if he just went into the doctor's office. I'm sure parents go to the doctors without their child frequently, if it's to get test results or something. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Either way, Ross was very embarrassed in that moment, and I thought it played out quite well. We then come to my favourite part of the episode, and this is Mike. Joey and Phoebe are going to set each other up on blind dates, and they're going to double date, and I feel like that's a good idea. It makes it a little bit less awkward when you're meeting somebody for the first time, but you're in a group, so if conversation dries up a bit, it's not a big deal. And Joey forgot, so he told Phoebe he's got a date for her with somebody called Mike, a name he plucked out of nowhere. What's he going to do? Well, I have to say, it seemed like a good idea, Mike being quite a common name. Joey goes down to Central Park and just yells out, Mike! And it just so happens that Mike is sitting in the corner. And this is, of course, Paul Rudd. And I'm so, so happy that we get Mike. I don't want to say too much about Mike as a character. Going forward, I will talk more about Mike. I don't want to give away too much in case you haven't seen beyond this episode, but I love him so much. They go on the double date. Mike pretends to know Joey. The conversation goes as one would expect, and Phoebe realizes quite quickly that Mike doesn't actually know Joey. And obviously Mike feels really awkward about it, but he goes to Central Park hoping to bump into Phoebe, which he does. He apologizes for how things went down and says that he is actually a piano player. And I feel like this is matching Phoebe's energy so perfectly because obviously he can't prove it. There's no piano there, but Phoebe tells him that wouldn't stop a real pianist. So he stands up. He could have just done it sitting down, but the fact that he stands up, positions himself, and for a couple of seconds pretends to play the piano, I just feel like he's matching Phoebe's energy so beautifully. And it's so lovely and such a great way to give us a little insight into Mike as a character. Maybe he doesn't take himself too seriously. Maybe he is somebody who could get along really well with Phoebe. And he asks her out, and I'll say no more. I'll just say I'm so glad we finally have the arrival of Mike. I've been waiting for this, and I'm looking forward to more of Mike going forward. And then we come to Chandler and Monica, and it's emotional, but less emotional than it could have been. And I'll talk about that in a moment. Chandler, as we learned in the previous episode, has to go to Tulsa to work, and he has managed to change it so that he can work 4 days in Tulsa and 3 days he can go back home. Or is it the other way on, 4 and 3? No, I'm pretty sure it's 4 days in Tulsa, 3 days he can go back home. And Monica says, no, I want to be with you every day of the week, which is fair enough. And then she gets a job offer that is too good to turn down. And Chandler says you should take it. And they'll just go back to the idea of 4 days in Tulsa, 3 days at home. And obviously that's a really good way of making Chandler leave, but also giving him a reason to come back. And Chandler leaving was emotional. It was really emotional, even though he's only going to be gone part of the week, which I have to say sounds exhausting. I don't know how far away Tulsa is. So apparently, I just Googled it, and it's about a 3.5 hour flight non-stop, or about a 6 hour flight connecting from New York to Tulsa. And to do that every week, there and back, plus the travelling to the airport, the waiting at the airport, it's exhausting just thinking about it. It really, really is. So credit to Chandler for being willing to do that. But obviously, still saying goodbye to him is quite emotional. But the reason it's not emotional as it could have been is that when I was doing the discussion for the previous episode, I learned that the belief that Chandler went to Tulsa because Matthew Perry was going to rehab is not necessarily correct. It seems like that was just a rumour. In Matthew Perry's memoir, and I won't go into too much detail, I talked about it at length in the previous episode discussion, but in his memoir he mentions that he went to rehab the summer between seasons 8 and 9, and that season 9 was the only year he was sober. He was completely sober. So it seems like Matthew Perry wasn't leaving the show briefly to go into rehab, and that if that was the case, it would be even more heartbreaking to watch him leave, even though he's going to come back 3 days of the week. So it was still emotional, but I'm really glad that I learned that actually it seems to just not be the case, that they wrote Chandler in Tulsa so Matthew Perry could film his scenes around the other regular schedule. So still emotional, but could have been heavier had I not learned that from the previous episode. It's a great episode. The story with Ross and Rachel is interesting enough. I quite liked it. The story with Phoebe and Mike, I love it so much. I think it played out beautifully. I think it's a fabulous introduction to Mike. It's quite a crazy introduction, and I love it. And then obviously with Chandler and Monica, it's emotion driven and moving and beautiful and emotional, and I love it. I can't fault the episode, which is not a surprise. I feel like season 9 is one of the strongest. Season 8 was very strong. Season 9, very strong as well. Looking forward to rewatching the rest of this season, and for now, of course, I'm pleased to say the one with the Pediatrician is an absolute delight.